Greetings and welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm glad you could be here with us today. Before we get underway, please take a moment to hit those like and subscribe buttons. And when all is said and done, please consider dropping a comment. It all helps feed that ever-hungry algorithm. And before we begin, a shout out to my Tier 4 Patreon patrons. Russ of the Frozen North, New 5AC, and Nick. Thank you very much. Now, on with the story. The Child by user Supersonic Potato. Vzk'tk glowered down at the bored-looking Cortai. "And what exactly can I do for you?" The Cortai sighed, tracing the veins running across its distended forehead with a finger, a typical gesture of frustration or boredom amongst its species. "The same thing that the last 3 people I tried to talk to could have done for me. There's a failed experiment in this box that I want to get rid of, and the Ruckatrip in this backwater corner of space offer a significant stipend for locating sentient children with no caretakers and getting them into the care system. Technically, it's sentient, and a child, so I'm here to drop it off and get at least a little return on my investment." Vzk'tk looked incredulously, and with a little more concern at the seamless silvery cube, its surface broken only by tiny pinprick air holes. "There's a child in there. Why would you keep a mere kid locked up like that?" Concern was rapidly becoming the more important of the two emotions. The Cortai pushed harder on his forehead. "Are you deaf? Are you all deaf? Because that would explain how hard this is. If you don't want it, please tell me so I can get off this mud ball and throw the thing out during ascent to orbit. Yes, there's a kid in there. It's even implanted with a translator and long-term inoculator. I filled out the papers. Myself, mind you. That was degrading. Then I showed up wherever this pitiful excuse for an orphanage is. That was worse. Take it or don't, I don't care anymore. Either way, I'm leaving in a minute." "We'll take any child but fantastic. Bye, morons." The Cortai stamped out. Vzk'tk signaled to her assistant to get him to stop, but the Cortai was having none of it, and actually walked straight underneath him, and out the door, mumbling about bioweapons and destroyed science expeditions, and liking a spinal cord where it was, leaving them both in somewhat stunned silence. Frankly, she had never seen a Cortai act like that. The egotism was all there, the immorality was out in full force, but he seemed excessively terse and very desperate to get it off his hands. Was he afraid of what was in the box? Was there really a child in there? Her assistant, an eager Vzk'tk, was the first to move. "What kind of creature would lock up a child like this?" he exclaimed, pacing anxiously around the container. "Help me get it out," he said, feeling around the box for any sort of seam or fissure. For a moment she hesitated. The box was small, probably not much more than 2 meters on each side, but still, short sentients could probably fit inside at least somewhat comfortably. But it was made from something very dense. That much she could tell by the way it barely shifted when her assistant pushed against it, even under the influence of the hover pallet, which was making a low whirring as it struggled to support its weight. Thin traces of circuitry were visible on the surface. It reminded her of a picture she'd once seen of a Cortai vault, only with the penetration detection systems on the outside. Why would they keep a child in something like this? She was sure it wasn't cheap either. She pressed her head to the side of the box. From the inside, she heard a slight noise, barely audible through the dense material. A pitched whine. It almost sounded like crying. That was all the proof she needed that there was something in there that needed her help. She joined her assistant in searching for some sort of a control panel. Within moments they found it. Pressing it, a wall of the container separated off, hovering on internal anti-gravity generators for a moment before falling, with a little fanfare, to the ground with a terrific crash. Vzk'tk winced as her suspicions about the weight of the material were confirmed as it put a deep dent in the floor of her office and sent a chair flying when its edge clipped it. They both peeked into the box. What greeted them was a pathetic sight. The inside of the cage was a mess. A small bowl for water, and another that had clearly once been filled by nutrient balls before they had been scattered about where they sat, dissolving slightly from the water splattered about the cage. There were several vague shapes thrown about, perhaps some attempted toys if it weren't for the fact that they were made out of some dense metal. A small creature, a quadriform, huddled in the furthest corner from them. It was totally hairless except for a large tuft of long, greasy strands on top of its head. Its limbs were slim, and its skin was a deathly pale. Rags of fabric hung to its body. Its face was streaked with grime, and its eyes and nostrils were red and swollen, and watered pitifully. Its glance burned bright with fear, and a spark of defiance. Vzk'tk ducked down, trying to seem as unimposing as possible, but still towered over the little creature. She reached out with one of the more delicate of her two sets of arms. "Hello, little one. Can you understand me?" As she reached out, the fear in the creature's eyes turned to terror. It turned away, shielding its face with its arms, and its legs kicked furiously, as if trying to push itself through the back of the cage. Vzk'tk took a breath. What had the Cortai done to this innocent being to make it act like this? She backed up slightly, dipping her head down, lying uncomfortably flat on the floor. "I'm not going to hurt you. You're safe now," she said, keeping her voice low and calm. The child hazarded a one-eyed glance at her. "You promise?" it managed. "I do." It surged towards her with blinding speed. In surprise, Vzk'tk jerked her head upwards, trying to avoid the blur that the child had become. It was hopeless. She managed to get her head clear, but the child slammed into her breath with enough force to make her stumble, arms locked around her neck and squeezed with painful force. In surprise, she instinctively tried to rear for a kick. She couldn't get off the ground. An urge to panic blossomed in her chest as she realized that her tiny attacker was much heavier than she appeared. It took her a moment before she realized that the pitched whine had returned. She looked down only to see the creature shivering from deep sobs racking through it, mumbling into Vzk'tk's breast, not a single word understandable, but all of them, no doubt, trying to explain the horrible ordeal she'd been through. She stroked the long strands of fur that cascaded down from the child's back, trying to return the vice-like hug with her strong manipulator arms. "Hush," she crooned, as deep sobs and the occasional grasp for breath filled the room. "Hush. It's okay now. Shh." The child, who Vzk'tk now knew was named Alice, sat on the edge of the crate, one leg dangling off the side, and the other curled to her chest, bent inwards at a seemingly impossible angle, her arms hugging it to her chest. It made Vzk'tk wince just looking at it. Bending a limb like that didn't seem like it should be possible without breaking at least 3 important bones. But Alice sat there like it was the most natural thing in the world. But Vzk'tk had other things to worry about. Despite the heartfelt moment they had shared, when Vzk'tk had introduced her to a male teacher who had often took responsibility for sports and exercise for the children, she had begun to act nervous again, following out of the office with obvious reluctance. Moments later, while Vzk'tk was trying to figure out how to pair the hover pallet for Alice's box to her tablet so she could get it out of her office, Alice had come hurtling back in at quite an impressive speed, literally bouncing off a wall with a smack before diving back into her box. While Vzk'tk was still trying to find out if Alice was hurt by the impact, not in the slightest miraculously, had shown up, gasping for air. It was time for midday class, and had decided to introduce Alice to the other children right away. Had put her up in front of the class and asked her to introduce herself, like any new arrival. She had stood there, frozen in abject terror for a few seconds, before running the entire way from the classroom to the office. "If we ever start a running team, we're putting her on it," he panted. "What's wrong, Alice?" Vzk'tk asked. "Everybody was staring at me, and they were all bigger, and everybody started talking at once, and nobody looked human at all, and I didn't know what to do." "Well, surely you've met at least a few people who aren't human, was it? Before." I know that some of them might look strange at first, but they're all really nice. No, I haven't. I was walking home from school and that alien abducted me. Then he poked me and hurt me and made me do things for him and hurt things for him. And the only time he didn't is when he locked me in the box. I tried to get away once. I really did. But when I got to a window, the only thing outside was stars. And then he sent big bug things after me, and they caught me and threw me in the box again for a long time. Alice finally took a breath. I'm scared, and I want to go home. I don't want to stay at this place. I want to go home. So, Alice was from a pre-spacefaring race. That made sense. It explained why the Cortai was willing to abduct her, torture her somehow, then drop her at an orphanage. If they tried to pull that with any known sentient, not even they would worm their way out of the ensuing fallout. Vzk'tk guessed that she couldn't very well just look her planet up and take her straight back then. She sighed and dipped her head closer to Alice's level. Alice, I'm going to try and find out where you live so you can go home, but it might take a while, okay? Alice brightened. Oh, my dad made me memorize where we live in case I got lost. I live at 8321 Keena Street in Sunnyvale, California. That'll help, right? Is California your planet? Alice scrunched up her face in apparent confusion. No, Earth is my planet. Why do you want to know that? Vzk'tk sighed. A planet named Ground, and the first thing out of her mouth is a local address. Definitely a pre-spacefaring race. She decided not to sugarcoat it. I think this may take me a while to find where you live. Oh, Alice managed. But don't worry, we'll find it, and you'll be able to go back. I might ask to see you and ask more questions about your home, so that I'll know what to look for. You can stay here with us as long as you want, and if there's anything we can do to make you more comfortable, please just ask. Well, there's one thing. I feel really weird walking around, like I'm floating. I think I'd be able to jump super high, but I keep feeling like I'm going to fall over. Can you fix that? So, Alice was from a high-gravity world. That would help in the search for her home. High-gravity worlds were more common than low-gravity ones, but most of the ones that might have any life at all were death worlds. There just weren't many places where sapient life could take root on massive planets. Sure, follow me, and we'll get you a weighted vest. That'll help, Vzk'tk said, guiding her towards the orphanage's machine shop, as tagged along. The orphanage was equipped to make clothes, furniture, and actually a great deal of the supplies required, thanks to a small machine shop, which was mostly just the room that housed an industrial-grade fabricator. They were lucky to get it. It had been provided to them for free as part of a short-lived government program, which had met a prompt end when it was realized that the machines were often worth more than all the other assets of the recipients' organizations put together. The thing could make almost anything. It had an AI smart enough that she had to do little more than tell it what she wanted, and it would design something to fit. It even had a built-in scanning system. Okay, Alice, this machine will make you a nice, snug vest. You just have to stand on the platform and follow the instructions. The machine clearly made Alice nervous, and she followed the path of the scanning arm with a wary gaze, but everything went well enough. The machine asked her to push on various parts in various positions to get a fix on her strength, then asked her to clear the build area and got to work. The first thing that Vzk'tk noticed was that the fabricator had switched to metallic cartridges. She was momentarily confused. Why would a weighted vest need something as dense as metal? If a weighted vest's mass wasn't spread out, it would cause pressure sores, or even actually cut the poor user. Generally, the only material used in weighted vests were high-density plastics. By the time the machine finished, she was flabbergasted. It had spread out the weight of the vest, in that it had put equally ridiculous amounts of it on every part of the vest, which at this point looked more like combat armor for some mercenary than any assistive device she had ever seen. It was a dull metallic gray, made of layers of woven metal fibers, thickening in places to solid plates which were often covered in what the computer told her was actual impact ceramic, used instead of the corrosion-resistant iron alloy that the rest of the vest was made up of to provide warmth as well as breathability. Somehow. A strangely out-of-place pink zipper ran up the middle of the vest. She blinked at the specifics. What had gone wrong to trigger such a malfunction? That vest was way too heavy for her to even lift, much less a little thing like Alice. Would they have to throw out the machine? She tabbed through the data. There was the problem. The machine had miscalculated Alice's strength somehow. These numbers were way too large. She must have not properly followed the measuring instructions. Well, that was an easy fix. They just have to find a way to get the vest off the building plane without breaking everybody's back and then zip! Vzk'tk peeked around the console where Alice stood wearing the vest with a smile on her face. "Thanks! This feels way better and it looks super cool!" Vzk'tk found herself at a momentary loss for words. When she returned to her senses, her first thought was to prevent Alice from taking another step before the additional weight drove her spinal cord through her pelvis. Unfortunately, that moment of hesitation was all that Alice needed to casually jump off the platform. The platform was a good half or even 3/4 of Alice's height off the ground. While a fall of that distance was long, few species would be at risk of anything more than a little bit of knee pain from taking it. However, Alice was wearing a weighted vest, a vest that would easily have taken 1 or 2 strong locale, creatures easily 3 times her height and somewhat known for their strength, to even lift. It would not be unreasonable for this impact to shatter every bone in Allison's legs on impact. It would not have been unreasonable for her bones to remain intact, but be driven up through her torso by the immense force. If she had the reflexes to bend her legs and spread the impact, she might get away with a handful of compound fractures. But most surprising of all was what actually happened. Alice bounced. She jumped off the ledge, landing on her feet and absorbing the titanic impact into her legs, storing it in muscles that did not tear despite the undoubtedly enormous strain stretched across the bones that were not snapped in half despite the stress, channeling it into the first of a series of excited hops. "What else can this machine make, huh? Do I have to go to meet the class? Can't I just stay here and learn about this?" It took a moment for Vzk'tk to realize that this was directed at her. Her thoughts had wandered to the question of what exactly Alice was, and how good of an idea it was to allow a being that could casually walk around in weight sufficient to fold most other creatures in half loose in her orphanage, even if it did happen to act a whole lot like her other charges. With more than a little effort, she pushed those thoughts out of her mind. Alice was a child. A scared child. Light years from home. Clearly a victim of some horrible Cortai experiments. Probably related to bioweapons or whatever the one that dropped her off had been mumbling about when it left. What sort of a person could call themselves a caretaker of children if they would turn away a child so in need of care as Alice? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been The Child by user Supersonic Potato. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, please go ahead and smash those like and subscribe buttons, and consider dropping us a comment down below. Everything helps. Now, as always, a huge shout out to my editor Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy. I could never do this without you. And a second shout out to Supersonic Potato for the permission. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the story. Yeah, not quite sure what all's going to happen in the midweek slot. It's probably mostly going to be short stories or occasionally slightly longer stories until we get a bit further into Deathworlders. Once we get to the right point in there, the midweek slot is going to be dedicated to a couple of longer and more detailed side stories from the Jenkins verse. Good Training and The Waters of Babylon being primarily amongst them. Okay, before we bring this to a close, if you're so inclined, go ahead and go over and check us out over on Patreon. The address is at the top of my YouTube page and in the video description. Okay, Now then, question, who's got the question? Okay, pie. What is your favorite kind of pie? Everybody's got a favorite kind of pie, I know that. For me, I have to say coconut cream, hands down. Absolute food of the gods. Leave your answers in the comments down below. In the meantime, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye.